because they're all coming up with their own ideas. Nobody bothers to go back and see what the Word actually says. Okay, go to Daniel 12. In verse 4, he said, "But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase." Boy, that's happening today. I mean, we don't have to go very far to realize what little bit of knowledge we had today, kind of like computers. How long is a computer built before it's obsolete? I mean, if you stop and think about how fast is knowledge turning over. Go to Esther. Everybody know where our book of Esther is, right?
Forgot.
It's over right after Nehemiah. Esther 4. The reason why I picked this particular verse is we see Joseph in a particular place at a particular time. We read the psalmist that talks about him being there for the appointed time, okay? We read in the book of Esther and the things that she does. And here's what it says in verse 14 of chapter 4. "For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Yehudi from another place." Why? Because it's the appointed time. "But you and your father's house will perish, yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for a time as this," at this appointed time. The Moed. You know how many people in organized religion believe that there is such a thing as a Moed? How can they when they're following all those pagan traditional holidays instead of doing what the Word says? Because the Word says that Yahweh's festivals are called what? Moed, the appointed time. It's unfortunate that in all of our English Bibles it's been translated as the word feast. But it means what? The Moed, the appointed times. And the festivals then are the appointed times, and he's telling us these things. Go to Luke 15. Well, we actually read that a while ago. That's about the prodigal son. We don't need to read that again. Go to Romans 8. You know, in the original organization of the books of the Bible, so to speak, Romans was not the first letter that was written. It was closer like, James or 1st, 2nd, 3rd John or one of the other, writers. Romans was way down the list written by Paul. But they stuck it up front. I guess if they can get people distorted in what they believe here, then everything else won't fall into place. But in Romans 8, look in verse 35. In Romans 8, he asked the question, and this is Rav Shaul, the Apostle Paul. Verse 35, "Who shall separate us from the love of the Mashiach, the anointed of Yahweh? Tribulation, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword?" He's asking a real simple question. What can separate you from the love of the Messiah? Remember, love, by biblical interpretation, is obedience to Yahweh's word, right? Did Messiah Yehoshua obey the word of Yahweh to the nth degree? Then who can separate us from that? And his death was so that anyone who will, what? Will be what? Become into his family, right? Okay. Go to Isaiah chapter 55. Verses 1 through 6 of Isaiah chapter 55. "Ho, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, and you who have no money, come, buy and eat. Yes, come, buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend money for what is not bread?" Boy, that's a real good question. Why do you spend money for what is not bread? "And your wages for what does not satisfy. Listen diligently to me and eat the good, and let your soul delight itself in abundance. incline your ear and come to me. Shema, or hear and obey, and your soul shall live, or have life. And I will make an everlasting covenant with you. I wonder how long everlasting means. That's forever, is it not? And then he said, the sure mercies of David, of the beloved. Indeed, I have given him a witness to the people. You know, the word witness there also means testimony. So David is a witness or a testimony to the people. A leader and commander for the people. Surely you shall call a nation you do not know, and nations who do not know you shall run to you. Because of Yahweh Eloheka, the Holy One of Israel, for he has glorified you. Boy, those are some strong words if we stop thinking about it. Can we apply that to each one of us now who are in his family? Who are feeding on the word? Have we not come to him? And when we came to him in the beginning, we didn't come with him trying to buy money or trying to do this or trying to do that. We didn't come, you know. We just came because we wanted to know. We wanted the truth for everything that he has for us. Isn't that what we're bathing ourselves in, trying to? Whatever it is, whatever your word says to do, that's what I want. That's what I'm going to eat. Okay? Nothing else has substance. And yet we make everything else have more substance than what his word says. And yet his word is the only thing that's going to live forever. Isn't it? And what his word says. You're back in Genesis, if we enter into verse 42. And I told you a while ago, and I gave you that word, that shibol, or shibol, about the bread or the ears and so forth, the corn. Back well, we're going to see the uniting of the brothers in this chapter, okay? And he uses the famine in the land to bring the sons of Yaakov together. He uses the fact that there is a famine in the land, okay? Now back in verse 5 there in chapter 41, just look at that for a second. He slept and dreamed a second time, and suddenly 7 heads of grain. That's that word, Shibol. 7641 is the number. Now, in this particular verse, this word, this 7641, it means ears of grain, but it also means a stream as flowing water. Okay? This word appeared, I showed you all in different places, about 10 times there in chapter 41. Okay? Go to the book of Ruth in chapter 2, and you'll find it once in verse 2. Chapter 1? Ruth chapter 2. Well, somebody took Ruth out since I read it a while ago. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's such a big book, In Ruth chapter 2 and in verse 2. So Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, please let me go to the field and glean heads of grain after him in whose sight I may find favor. And she said to her, go, my daughter. She went to get the grain, right? But the word that she used in these heads of grain also means this streams, this flowing water. How many times did Messiah say, if you come to me, if you eat him, if you eat his flesh, if you eat the bread of life, right? If you eat of me, he said, out of your belly flow rivers of living water. So when he talks, he's talking about not only the food, but the water as well, right? Go to Job, chapter 24. We don't go to Job very much. We probably ought to go to Job more than we do. But in Job chapter 24 and in verse 24, verse 24, they are exalted for a little while, then they are gone. They are brought low. They are taken out of the way like all. They dry out like the heads of grain. Kind of funny that this was talking about they dry out and then uses the word for grain, which includes flowing water. Right? I mean, we can know where the flowing water is, but if you don't drink of it, what do? You kind of dry up, okay? Go to Psalm 69. In this one here is a psalm of David, and it's set to another psalm called the Lilies, as far as the melody is concerned. In verse 1 and 2, it says, "Save me, O El, for the waters have come up to my neck. I sink in deep mire. I sink in deep mire where there is no standing. I have come into deep waters where the floods overflow me." Okay? This whole psalm, is kind of referring to the floods of water, the Sheol, this watering, running streams and so forth, okay? Now go to Isaiah 17. I'm kind of bouncing around here, but I think you're going to see all this come together here in just a minute. Isaiah 17 in verse 5. "It shall be as when the harvester gathers the grain and reaps the heads with his arm. It shall be as he who gathers heads of grain in the valley of Rephaim." Here it's referred to as grain. Okay? Now go to Isaiah 27 and in verse 12. "And it shall come to pass in that day, Yahweh will thresh." Thresh kind of like what? Gathering grain, right? "From the channel of the river to the brook of Egypt, and you will be gathered one by one, O you children of Israel." The other day we were looking at that passage where it talks about bringing in the sheaves. Bringing in the sheaves, okay? Joseph had a sheaf. All the other brothers, their sheaf bowed down to his sheaves, okay? Here in verse 12, Isaiah is referred to as a channel of a river. That's the word, the Sheol. And he begins to gather all the children of Israel one by one. Messiah made the statement, he said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." He said the kingdom of heaven doesn't come with observation, right? He said, "To what shall we liken the kingdom of heaven? It's like a woman puts a measure of leaven in some grain or in some flour, right, or something, and then it began to grow." You know how you make bread. It grows and it gets bigger and bigger, but it doesn't come with observation. When you mix the bread up, you put a cloth on it, put it in one place, and go off, and you come back, it's bigger than what it was. What do they do? Cut it in half, beat it up, and put it back in the cover, and go away, and come back, it still gets bigger, right? Go to Zechariah chapter 4. Zechariah chapter 4 and verse 12. "And I further answered and said to him, What are these 2 olive branches that drip into the receptacles of the 2 gold pipes from which the golden oil drains?" The word branches is this word Sheol, referring to the 2 olive branches that the oil flows through the hands of to fill the lampstand, to bring the light. And then we go back, and even in Revelation it talks about the 2 what? The 2 witnesses, which are the 2 olive trees which stand before Yahweh the whole earth, right? And these branches is this word Sheol. Okay, go to Judges chapter 12. There's lots of people who really get upset sometimes when you're talking about the true name, okay? And a lot of them know, and a lot of them don't know, and most people don't really understand what the difference is, Well, we speak English, we got to know what it is, right? Dialect doesn't really matter. You say one thing, I say another. Tomato, tomato, it's the same thing. In Judges chapter 12, in verse 1. "Then the men of Ephraim gathered together, crossed over toward Zephon, and said to Jephthah, Why did you cross over to fight against the people of Ammon and did not call us to go with you? We will burn your house down on you with fire. These are the people of Ephraim who are really upset with Jephthah. Verse 2, and Jephthah said to them, my people and I were in a great struggle with the people of Ammon, and when I called you, you did not deliver me out of their hand. So when I saw that you would not deliver, I took my life in my hands and crossed over against the people of Ammon, and Yahweh delivered them into my hand. Why then have you come up to me this day to fight against me? You know, Ephraim, if you go back and study the history, they don't have too good a history. They're kind of wild, they're kind of petulant, they kind of like to fight. They kind of lost a lot of them. Verse 4, now Jephthah gathered together all the men of Gilead and fought against Ephraim. And the men of Gilead defeated Ephraim because they said, you Gileadites are fugitives of Ephraim among the Ephraimites and among the Manasshites. You're saying, well, you're just part of us, but you're fugitive, you're trying to run away. That's what they're arguing. You're really not part of it. Verse 5, the Gileadites seized the fords. The fords are the places where you cross over the Jordan River, the Yarden, right? Before the Ephraimites arrived. And when any Ephraimite who escaped said, let me cross over, the men of Gilead would say to him, are you an Ephraimite, or you are of the tribe of Ephraim? If he said no, then they would say to him, then say, Shibboleth. And he would say, Sibboleth, for he could not pronounce it properly. He was saying Sibol, which means a head of grain, but the one he's trying to get him to say was the head of grain as well as the branches or the channels of water. Is it important to know the name? And this one word referring to the one who what? Is the food man for life, and it refers to the one from whom the rivers of living water come. And you think it's not important to know his name? And he would say Sibboleth, for he could not pronounce it right. Then they would take him and kill him at the fords of the Yarden. There fell at that time 42,000 Ephraimites. They're trying to cross over to go through the descender, and they can't go through because they can't pronounce the name. Now, is that what this is saying, or what? Did I embellish it? Well, if I did, I'm glad. I'm hoping people will begin to see the importance of what he attaches to this, okay? 42,000 Ephraimites died because they didn't know the name of the branch. The word they spoke, Sibboleth, is the number 5451, which refers to an ear of grain but not associated with the branch.
54 what?
5451. Not knowing the name of the branch, they died. Okay, now go back and we'll continue on in chapter 42 there in Genesis. When Yaakov saw that there was grain in Egypt, Yaakov said to his sons, why do you look at one another? That there was grain in Egypt. Word grain there is the number 6668. It's the Hebrew word sheber. It's funny, this word, this 67668, it comes from a root, the number 7667. And this word, the root of it, also means a solution or interpretation of a dream. There was grain in Egypt. That word grain is what we're talking about there in that verse 1 of chapter 42. Remember, in the dreams that Joseph had that he told his brothers, you know, they were all going to come down to bow down to him, right? And here they are coming down, you know, and he's getting them down. And maybe he didn't realize they're not when he said the words, but these words are referring to the fulfillment of a dream that Joseph had. In verse 2, and he said, indeed, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down to that place and buy for us there, that we may live and not die. So Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. In the first dream that he had, how many of the brothers bowed down? 10. But Yaakov did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, lest some calamity befall him. And the sons of Israel went to buy among those who journeyed, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. It wasn't all in Egypt, it was in the whole world. It was even in Canaan. The famine was everywhere, right? No matter where they went. Now, back in the prophecy, there was his 10 brothers. There was the stars, you know, the 10 stars. But it didn't include Benjamin. Go back and look at 37:7, Genesis 37:7. So there we were, binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright, and indeed your sheaf stood all right and bowed down to my sheaf. Okay? And the brothers saying, shall you indeed rule over us or reign over us? Well, remember, Benjamin is his own brother. You know, they were the only two of the same, you know, mother. And then in verse 9, then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brother and said, look, I have dreamed another dream, and this time the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed down to me. So now specifically makes a difference. It'd be 10 plus 1. So before it was a 10, now we got the 10 plus 1, be 11. It's the Hebrew, that's the way you make the word 11. 10 plus echad. 10 plus 1. So going back in 42 there, he's very protective. Yaakov did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, lest some calamity befall him. So he's very protective of him. And the sons of Israel went to buy among those who journeyed, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Among those who journeyed. When they were going down to Egypt, they met people from all the different lands of the world going down to Egypt to buy bread. Because why? There was a famine in the whole world. Everywhere. And everybody knew that the only place you could get bread was in Egypt. And everybody knew the only place you could get the true bread of life is from the bread man of the life, Joseph, in Egypt. Word had gone out everywhere. I mean, it had been a lot of years. You know, when we get there, we're going to find out that they're 5 years into this famine, and he tells them there's still 2 more to go. It's going to be tough. Verse 6, now Joseph was governor over the land, and it was he who sold all the people of the land, and Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him with their faces to the earth. Benjamin wasn't with them. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. Then he said to them, where do you come from? And they said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. You know, he knew where they were from. And they bowed down to him here, you know, the 10. It's kind of like the brother who was thrown into a pit, then sold into slavery in Egypt, now has the opportunity for revenge, doesn't he? But he doesn't take it. But instead, he tests them as brothers. So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Remember, he's what? He's clean shaven. He's probably wearing Egyptian clothes. He's definitely speaking Egyptian, because it says later on, you know, when he talked to them, he only spoke through an interpreter. They didn't have any idea he spoke Hebrew. Then Joseph remembered the dream which he had dreamed about them and said to them, you're spies. Let me ask a question. In the world today, in modern times, if somebody gets shot down in an airplane or falls off a satellite or drops off the moon in some other country, the first thing that country claims is, oh, you're spies. Isn't that what happens to all, you know, any time? Of course, most of the time it's true. But I mean, you know, but that's what comes up to this kind of a Mideastern philosophy, that if somebody comes in the land and is not born there, it's because they're a spy. It doesn't matter right now that people from all over the world is coming to Egypt because it's the only place to get grain, right? You're spies, you have come to see, or to see the nakedness of the land. Or he said, you've come to find out how exposed the land is. You know, they're looking for a way to attack it. Remember, he's now, you know, 30 years old, right? But he became viceroy, and they haven't seen him in 13 years. They don't have any idea what he's grown up and be, what he, you know, what he appears to be now. In verse 11 they say, we're all one man's sons, we're honest. Your servants are not spies. But he said to them, no, but you have come to see the nakedness of the land. And they said, your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And in fact, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more. You know, he's got to be wondering what the heck they told the father about what happened to him. Because he don't know. So one is with the father and one is no more. But Joseph said to them, it is as I spoke to you, saying you're spies. Though he's keeping up this pretext. In verse 15 he says, in this you shall be tested. That implied is, he's fixed, the words he's fixing speak is the manner of their testing. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. He caught them in their own word, didn't he? Somewhere the scripture says something about we'll be what? We'll be condemned or, exalted by our words, right? Out of our mouth. Send one of you, let him bring your brother, and you shall be kept or bound in prison, that your words may be tested to see whether there's any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. He doesn't mention the one that's missing that they said was missing. He just mentions the youngest, the ones that they said was with the father. He doesn't say a thing in the world about what happened to the one that's missing. So he put them all together in prison 3 days. Then Joseph said to them the third day, do this and live, for I fear Elohim. If you are honest, let one of your brothers be confined to your prison house, but you go and carry grain for the famine of your houses. He's kind of found a way that he can send grain back to the father and the rest of the family, but yet keep them as prisoners. And he's just going to keep one of them. He's going to find out if they really care about one another. Verse 20 says, and bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified, and you shall not die. And they did so. Then they said to one another, we are truly guilty concerning our brother. See, now they're going back remembering what they did to Joseph. We're never really told back at the time that Joseph was in the pit and the brothers threw him in there, what he said, or did he cry out, or did he raise Cain, or did he try to keep him going in the pit? We're never really told what took place between them and him when they threw him in there. Can you imagine any words that could have come out of his mouth while he's down in the bottom of this pit? Can't get out. I mean, it got to be, frustration there. We are truly guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us. They saw the anguish of his soul. Evidently, the words that he pleaded, they came straight. They were, they were real. And we would not hear, therefore this distress has come upon us. But it didn't take them long to get the point. And Reuben answered them, saying, did I not speak to you, saying, do not sin against the boy, and you would not listen. Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us. But they did not know that Joseph understood, for he spoke to them through an interpreter. Can you imagine the drama that's playing out right here? And Joseph is seeing all this, And of course, we're going to see how hard it is for him to keep a straight face, to keep, as the British would say, a stiff upper lip, or whatever that means. Verse 24, and he turned himself away from them and wept. Then he returned to them again and talked with them, and he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. Then Joseph gave a command to fill their sacks with grain, to restore every man's money to his sack, and to give them provisions for the journey. Thus he did for them. He's given the instruction. Man, everything is being totally orchestrated to the nth degree here. So they loaded their donkeys with the grain and departed from there. But as one opened his sack to give his donkey feed at the encampment, he saw his money, and there it was in the mouth of his sack. That's got to be a shock. So he said to his brothers, my money has been restored, and there it is in my sack. Then their hearts failed, or sank, and they were afraid, saying to one another, what is this Elohim has done to us? They're still thinking that what they did to their brother, is causing all this stuff to come upon them. Right? And in a way, they're right. Okay? Then they went to Yaakov their father in the land of Canaan and told him all that had happened to them, saying, the man who is master of the land spoke roughly to us and took us for spies of the country. But we said to him, we are honest men, we're not spies. We're 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, the youngest is with our father this day in the land of Canaan. Then the man, the master of the country, said to us, by this I will know that you're honest. Leave one of your brothers with me. Take for the famine of your households and be gone. And bring your youngest brother to me, so I shall know that you are not spies, but that you are honest. And I will deliver your brother to you, and you may trade in the land. Then it happened. I mean, you know, the drama that's involved in all of this is kind of, you know. Then it happened as they emptied their sacks, and surprisingly, each man's bundle of money was in his sack, and when their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. See, one just found it in his. And now they're opening all of them. The father's there. All their money is there. Don't you know they really can't? I mean, how in the world can they find any type of explanation to explain this? Well, people be running around and they holler, oh, you know, Yahweh worked a miracle. And Yaakov their father said to them, you have bereaved me. Joseph is not. Simeon is not, and you want to take Benjamin. All these things are against me. I mean, think about what he's saying here, and then when we get on down a little more, when he's standing before Pharaoh and the conversation he has with Pharaoh. Then Reuben spoke to his father, saying, kill my 2 sons if I not bring him to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you. Oh, it worked. But Reuben offered his 2 sons, right? But he said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If any calamity should befall him along the way in which you go, then you would bring my gray hair with sorrow to the grave. In chapter 43, in a way, this is where Judah takes over from Reuben. Now the famine was severe in the land, and it came to pass when they had eaten up the grain which they had brought from Egypt, that their father said to them, go back, buy us a little food. But Judah spoke to him, saying, the man solemnly warned us, saying, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send, we will not go down. For the man said to us, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. And Israel said, why did you deal so wrongfully with me as to tell the man whether you had still another brother? But they said, the man asked us pointedly about ourselves and our kindred, saying, is your father still alive? Have you brothers? And we told him according to these words. Could we possibly have known that he would say, bring your brother down? Well, they didn't have any idea what he was going to do. Then Judah said to Israel his father, send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones. I myself will be surety for him. From my hand you shall require him. He didn't offer his children, he offers himself. If I do not bring him to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. For if we had not lingered, surely by now we would have returned this second time. He said, if we hadn't been piddling around here, waiting, we could have already been down there and back. And their father Israel said to them, if it must be so, then do this. Take some of the best fruits of the land in your vessels and carry down a present for the man. A little balm, a little honey, spices and myrrh, pistachio, nuts, and almonds. I thought they were having a famine. A famine in the land of grain, right? But the nuts and all these things were still growing. Take double money in your hand, and take back in your hand the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. They're not short of money. Take your brother also and arise. Go back to the man. And may El Shaddai, what it has in, 410 and 77, 76, I believe, Shaddai. And may El Shaddai give you mercy before the man, that he may release your other brother and Benjamin. If I am bereaved, I am bereaved. That's kind of like what Esther said. If I die, I die. But she goes before the king to plead for her people. Isn't that what they're doing here? All the lessons in this, one person offering their life for their own, you know, it's the same thing Messiah did. When we get over in Mark and he talks about you take up your stake daily. That's what you're supposed to do, offer your life to him on a day-to-day basis. And yet people can't see it. Verse 15, so the men took that present and Benjamin, and they took double money in their hand and arose and went down to Egypt, and they stood before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, take the men to my home and kill an animal, and make ready, for these men will dine with me at noon. 6672, the word noon, so hard. At the time of double light, which is like, you know, noon is the time of double light.
What's the number again?
6671 or 72, I can't tell.
7-2.
Okay, my writing is getting kind of 6672. But they're still worried about the money. Okay. And then the man did as Joseph ordered. The man brought the men into Joseph's house. Now the men were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house, and they said, it's because of the money which was returned in our sacks the first time that we are brought in, so that he may seek an occasion against us and fall upon us to take us as slaves with our donkeys. When they drew near to the steward of Joseph's house, they talked with him at the door of the house and said, oh, sir. Can you imagine back in them saying, oh, sir? Or it would have been something more like, you know, Adonai, my Lord, my master. Okay, they're trying to be some very, you know, subservient. We indeed came down the first time to buy food. But it happened when we came to the encampment that we opened our sacks, and there each man's money was in the mouth of his sack, our money in full weight, so we have brought it back in our hand. And we have brought down other money in our hands to buy food. We do not know who put our money in our sacks, but he said, you know that him and Joseph had collaborated on this, right? But he said, peace be with you, do not be afraid. Elohechem, and Elohei of your father, has given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money. Then he brought Simeon out to them. They hadn't even got to Joseph yet, and then here's the steward telling them. He said, your creator has given you a blessing. I had your money. So the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their donkeys feed. Washing the feet and giving the donkeys feed. You go back to when, you know, the servant went down looking for a bride. And she gave him water, and she fed the camels and all this kind of stuff. The servant is somebody else. You know, throughout the scriptures, Messiah talks about what? If you want to be great, you got to be a servant to all. Then they made the present ready for Joseph coming at noon, for they heard that they would eat bread there. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house, and bowed down before him to the earth. Then he asked him about well-being, and said, is your father well, the old man of whom you spoke? Is he still alive? Evidently it's been a while since they were down there and back. And they answered, your servant, our father, is in good health. He is still alive. And they bowed their heads down and prostrated themselves. How many is there right now? How many? 11 of them. Just like the second dream said would be. Then he lifted his eyes and saw his brother, Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, is this your younger brother of whom you spoke to me? And he said, Elohim be gracious to you, my son. Now his heart yearned for his brother. So Joseph made haste and sought to weep, and he went into his chamber and wept there. Pretty good. He wanted to cry, and he couldn't help it, so he went off and hid, you know. Then he washed his face and came out, and he restrained himself and said, serve the bread. The food is what they... So they set him a place by himself, and them by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat food with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. Now, yeah, if the Hebrews and Joseph and the Egyptians are not eating together, you know, something's happening. But notice what this really says. The Egyptians could not eat food with the Hebrews, for that's an abomination to them. Later on in the Torah, you know, just like Peter said, you know how unlawful it is for one of the Hebrew to go to another. That came in the Torah later, but this is between the Egyptians and the Hebrew. The world out there right now really don't want much to do with the Hebrew. Do they? They don't want to eat with them. They don't want to do nothing. Verse 33, and they set before him the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth, and the men looked in astonishment at one another. How'd they know who was who? How'd they know who was the oldest and who was the youngest? Now, they may have known who the youngest was, but how about, you know, which one was the oldest and which, all them in between? Somebody had to know. Then he took servings to them from before him, but Benjamin's serving was 5 times as much as any of theirs. So they drank and were merry with him. You know, don't you think that they're beginning to think something's happening here? What is it? I mean, they're bound to be wondering what's going on. Chapter 44. And he commanded the steward of his house, saying, fill the men's sacks with food as much as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his sack. Also put my cup, the silver cup. That word silver cup. The word for silver, of course, is 3701. The word silver is normally used in the Hebrew to refer to money. Okay? The word cup is 1375. It just means cup. So you might say, you know, put my cup, the money cup, or the silver cup, or the cup of money. In the Pentateuch and in other places, it described part of the ritual that they used to do sometimes, but they would throw money or pieces of coin or gold or silver or something into this cup full of some kind of liquid, and then they would read the patterns that the ripples made, you know, and they would determine, you know, divine the future based on what that was. So it was called the money cup. So also put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest in his grain money. So he did according to the word that Joseph had spoken. As soon as the morning dawned, the men were sent away, they and their donkeys. When they had gone out of the city and were not yet far off, Joseph said to his steward, get up, follow the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, why have you repaid evil for good? Is not this the one from which my master drinks, and with which he indeed practices divination? You have done evil in so doing. So he overtook them, and he spoke to them these same words. They're accusing them of stealing the cup. Now the one that went down, isn't he the one that put the cup in the other one's sack? That's the one that Yoda told him to put the cup in Benjamin's sack. So he starts searching. And they said to him, why does my master say these words? Far be it from us that your servants should do such a thing. Look, we brought back to you from the land of Canaan the money which we found in the mouth of our sacks. How then could we steal silver or gold from your master's house? They got a good argument, don't they? But that doesn't have any bearing on the plan. With whomever of your servants it is found, let him die, and we also will be my master's slave. Boy, they are sure of themselves. But you know, it's rash to make oaths like that when you don't know everything. And he said, now also let it be according to your words. With he with whom it is found shall be my slave, and you shall be blameless. He turns it around and took the death penalty out of it. Then each man speedily let down his sack to the ground, and each opened his sack. So he searched and began with the oldest and left off with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. He started with the oldest. He knew where it was. But do you think they're building drama as he's going through here? I mean, if we can't see a little bit of humor and drama in this whole thing, you know, and remember, who's the one that orchestrated this whole thing? Yahweh. Who's the one who had the words put down? Yahweh. Why did he tell us all this? It is something we're supposed to learn from. Then they tore their clothes, and each man loaded his donkey and returned to the city. So Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, and he was still there, and they fell before him on the ground. And Joseph said to them, what deed is this you have done? Did you not know that such a man as I can certainly practice divination? The word said they can, it didn't say he did. He's still playing this facade. I mean, we all know and everything that Joseph done, he always goes to Yahweh. He doesn't practice divination. But he said, don't you know that I can? Then Judah said, what shall we say to my master? What shall we speak? Or how shall we clear ourselves? Ha Elohim, the Creator, has found out the iniquity of your servants. Here we are, my master's slaves, both we and also with whom the cup was found. They're relating this all back to Joseph and not their and the sin and what they'd done with Joseph. And they're saying, you know, we have been found out. And it's like for the death of Joseph, we're all fixing to pay. But he said, far be it from me that I should do so, but the man in whose hand the cup was found, he shall be my slave, and as for you, go up in peace to your father. He's saying, no, I'm going to keep Benjamin, and the rest of you go home. Now, we all remember what Judah told his father, right? Now, we're going to start right there in verse 18 next week. That concludes the reading for this day. That's a cliffhanger, isn't it? and I'll tell you right now, between, you know, the rest of this chapter, the words from Judah have been looked at by sages and rabbis and teachers of Torah for years as being one of the most beautiful confessions of guilt, you know, that's ever been written as far as Scripture concerning what Judah said. You might want to look at it and study it and see what he says. Kind of interesting. But go with me now, because it is coming up on Hanukkah. You know, we're getting ready for the end of it. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 66. Kind of a short reading today. In Isaiah chapter 66. Verse 1. Now I'm going to add a little bit of commentary to this because I think it's kind of very apropos for today. And just to give you a thought, if you go through and count all the books in the Old and New Testament, you're going to find how many books in our modern Bible? 66, right? If you go through the book of Isaiah, how many chapters are there? If you kind of go back then and compare each chapter to a particular book, starting with Genesis through, you kind of be a little bit interesting in how close chapter 66 matches up with the book of Revelation, which is talking about the wrath of Yahweh that's coming on the whole world, right? I mean, these things, I mean, I'm not trying to say that this is true, but I'm just saying it's a very interesting concept, you know, when it matches up and you wonder, how in the world did it do that? You know. So in verse 1, it starts out and says, thus says Yahweh. Now let's go to Matthew 5. In Matthew chapter 5, in verses 33 through 37. Verse 33, he says, again you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oath to Yahweh. But I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is Yahweh's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair white or black, but let your yes be yes, and your no, no. For whatever is more than these is from the evil one. A lot of time people will tell you, oh, I swear so-and-so, and they want to go through all kinds of stuff to make you believe what they're saying is true. Why do they feel like they have to do that? Is their word got such a tainted history that they can't be believed? I mean, think about it. Why, we're trying to, But that's what he's saying. Whatever your word says, that's it. Isn't that what he says? Well, if we believe that, and I said a lot of times, a lot of believers today, they don't even believe what the word says here. And these are in red, right? This Messiah speaking. Do they believe that? He said, man, and he's saying, let it whatever your word is. Yes, yes, no, no. which he's saying is whatever word comes out of your mouth, that's it. That's it. That's the way it's going to be, right? Go back to Isaiah 66. Thus says Yahweh. Do you reckon he means just like Messiah said over there? So whatever he says here, that's the way it is, right? Heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool. Where is the house that you will build me? If this is true, what about all these people out here running around saying, oh, Yahweh told me to build this church? Oh, I'm not ingratiating myself to a lot of people, am I? Where is the house you will build me, and where is the place of my rest? For all those my hand has made, and all those exist, or have come to pass, says Yahweh. That word exists, 1961, Hayah, come to pass. All those my hand has made, and all those exist, says Yahweh. He said, my word went out, and it did what I sent it to do. But on this will I look, on the poor and of the contrite spirit, and who trembles at my word. You reckon he meant for the time being or forever? I mean, those are things that people have to... You think he's just telling these stories for the fun of it, and then he's going to throw them all away? Verse 3, he who kills a bull as if he slays a man. He who sacrifices a lamb as if he breaks a dog's neck. He's talking about the people that do these things, but their heart's not right. Their mouth glorifies him, but their heart far from him. He told us that in many, many places. He who offers a grain offering is as if he offered swine's blood. If you go back to Cain and Abel, what did Cain offer? Grain offering. What did Abel offer? A flock, right? And he said, he's as a grain offering as if he offered swine's blood. And he refused to accept Cain's, didn't he? If he refused to accept Cain's, and here he said, a grain offering sometimes is as a person offered swine's blood, which is saying he's not going to accept it. And if what we eat is supposed to be of an animal that could have been offered as a sacrifice to him, why would he accept anything concerning something he said is an abomination in the first place? He who burns incense as if he blesses an idol. But now he says, just as they have chosen their own ways, and their soul delights in their abominations, so will I choose their delusions and bring their fears on them, because when I called, no one answered. When I spoke, they did not hear. But they did evil before my eyes and chose that in which I do not delight. He's saying they chose their own ways. They wouldn't hearken to my word. Boy, is that not what's happening today? Go to Psalm 50. In verse 16 and 17. Now notice who he's speaking to here. Now this was a psalm of Asaph. In verse 16 it says, but to the wicked Elohim says, what right have you to declare my statutes, or take my covenant in your mouth? Well, that could apply to anybody today who's trying to speak about Yahweh's covenant. Or take my covenant in your mouth, seeing you hate instruction and cast my words behind you. I would submit to you there's an awful lot of people out today that are talking about keeping covenant with Yahweh, the covenant we have, or the covenant this, or the covenant that, trying to explain covenant. We're in covenant relationship, and yet they have cast his word behind their back. Go over to 2 Thessalonians. Everybody knows what that one says, right? In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Let's start at verse 7. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Mystery of lawlessness, transgression of the Torah, transgression of the law, right? Is already at work. Only he who now restrains, it's implied will do so, until he is taken out of the way. And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom Yehoshua will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming. Verse 9, his coming, his referring to the object of verse 8, the lawless one, his coming, the lawless one, is according to the working of Hasatan, the adversary, with all power, signs, and lying wonders, and with all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. The Gospel of John, what did Messiah say? Your word is truth. How many people today have a love for his word? Have a love for the truth? And because they have not received the love for the truth, Yahweh says he's going to send them what? For this reason, Elohim will send them strong delusion that they should believe the lie. Isn't that exactly what we read over in Isaiah 66? Messiah said, don't even think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. Did he say that? Verse 12, that they all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. They had pleasure in walking against the Torah. People don't want to give up things that they have pleasure for. And they balk, they get angry. I did. All of us at some point in time have rebelled whenever things come up that we have to say, oh, get rid of. Right? And people say things like, well, you're trying to take away the only thing that I have any fun left. What can I do now to enjoy? I mean, I can say those things because I know when I said it. In that other half, But then I think they're kind of programmed to be able to give up things quicker than men are. Men have a tough time. I did. That they all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Does this not say that those who don't believe the truth will be condemned? Does that say that? Or am I adding that to it? Or is that what it said? Okay. Go back to Isaiah. Well, actually go to Proverbs first. Chapter 16. In verse 7. If we could ever get a hold of this, in verse 7, when a man's ways please Yahweh, that man or woman, either one, right? When a member of the human race, Adamah is mankind, not just a man, but mankind. Mankind includes men and women. Just like tigers include male and female tigers. In lions, there are male and female lions. When a man's ways please Yahweh, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. You want to get rid of your enemies? Obey Yahweh. Isn't that what he said? And he can make your enemies to be at peace with you. They might not like you, but you can walk in the assurance of knowing that they're not going to come against you, because Yahweh is going to make you be at peace, or make them to be at peace with you, right? Isn't that what the word says? Okay. Verse 5, back in Isaiah 66. Hear, 808:5, Shema, hear with understanding and obey the word of Yahweh. You who tremble at his word, your brethren who hated you, who cast you out for my name's sake, said. Yeah, if we stop and think about that, that's exactly what Joseph's brothers did to him. Now, we're not told that they said these other words, but in modern times he tells us that in those days men are going to come, they're going to kill you, and they're going to think that they're doing the will of Yahweh. Didn't it say that? Mm-hmm. Your brethren who hated you, who cast you out for my name's sake, said, let Yahweh be glorified, that we may see your joy, but they shall be ashamed. That's not something that we want to come on our family and friends and all of those who do those things and say those things to us. We don't want that for them, but it's going to happen. Yahweh said, I didn't come to bring peace, I came to bring a sword. And a man's enemies are going to be who? The members of his own household. That's where it's going to be. Your obedience to Yahweh's word speaks volumes more than you saying one thing and doing something else. Verse 6, the sound of noise from the city, a voice from the temple, the voice of Yahweh who fully repays his enemy. Remember, when people get mad at you or angry because you're walking obedience to Torah, they're not angry with you, they're angry because they don't want to obey that word. Because they feel restricted in their own life. Nobody likes to give up control of their life. Verse 7, before she travailed, she gave birth. Before her pain came, she delivered a male child. Put a little note there, Revelation 12, 1 through 5. That was a male child who's to rule all nations with a rod of iron. Does anybody recognize that Revelation talks about a male child being born to the nation of Israel who's going to rule all nations with a rod of iron? What does that mean?